Now that I have a div tag and I want them to do two different things and I know how classes work, it's time to give these some names. So I'm going to go ahead and go up to this div tag, and inside the opening tag, because that's the parent, I'm going to put a class equal to left div. I'm then going to go down to the div tag for right content, and I'm going to do the same thing, but this time calling it right div so I can keep track. Does it matter to the computer what this says? No, but you definitely want to make normal names that are very specific. So that way, if somebody else picks up your coding, they can know what it's about, and so that you don't forget what it's about. We know that this CSS is going to the left div. So I'm going to go ahead and go before this, and I'm going to put a period instead to say I'm calling upon a class, and put left div. That period will then grab it, and you'll notice that the second you start doing that, the left content box is now stylized while the right content box has no stylization because it's not calling upon left div, it's calling upon right div. I can then take this entire tag and I can copy and paste it down below, renaming it to be right div, and instead of it floating to the left, I want it to float to the right. When you do this, you'll see that in fact it is floating to the right, but is not floating past the main content. And that depends on how it's written up in your HTML. So this is kind of fascinating because if you think about it, first it's floating your left content, then it's looking at the main content and floating it, and then floating the right content. Well, this is an issue because if you think about the order in which your computer, a robot, is taking these and actually translating them to make them look correct, it's learning to float the main before it's learning to float the right div, which means it's going to float the main as far over as it can get it to be, which is the edge of the page. So we really want the main to occur after the right div because we want it to float the right div first, then the main. So we're going to take the main, I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to go ahead and put it below my right div in this HTML here. And now what's happening is the computer is first creating the left content box, floating it to the left, then it creates the right content box, flows it all the way to the right of the page as far as it can go, and then creates the main content and floats it to the right. So you now have created two divs that do two different things, even though they're both div tags. They've used a class to do two different things, and you got the main content in the middle. Now you can see here that our texture footer is not is here, but our box is not. Our yellow box is gone. And this is thinking back to how your page actually is structured. So if I go here, for instance, and I take main's background color away, you're going to see that it becomes yellow. Well, that yellow is actually the footer background. Because if you recall, when we put two rubber duckies in the bathtub, sometimes the footer is trying to float up in between and the background color leaves, but the text doesn't. We need to push everything down. So I'm going to go and put that gray back there. And I'm going to go to my section, which I don't have a CSS for my section. So I'm going to go ahead and put section here, open it up, and I'm going to give it a height equal to the height of the div tags, which is 300 pixels, which will push the footer down. And now you have a full layout. And what I think is important to note is that we made two divs doing two different things and had to float them to the left and the right. What we're going to look at next is how to do this with Bootstrap. Go ahead and save that, and don't forget to turn it in.